What's the name acronym?
Well, thank you all for being here this evening. And God willing, the recording will work, and everybody who's not here will be sorry they weren't, because they're going to see their friend. They're really going to wish that they were here to ask questions of our speaker, Ariel Birnbaum, who is a professional Israeli tour guide, which I don't know, but I've heard that getting that certification is like getting a master's degree in Israel history. And we've had a number of conversations, and any questions you have, Ariel really is the guy to ask. And so, without further ado,
all right. You wanted to? You're going to start with those prayers, or you want to do that? Okay, one in that. Okay, all right. Do you guys want me to use a microphone? Is this? Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
All right. I think for me it's a little more comfortable to speak like this. So my name is Ariel. Ariel Birnbaum. I actually was born here in the U.S., born in New York, and I moved to Israel when I was 4. So my family, we made Aliyah, and I grew up in Israel near Tel Aviv. And from a very young age, I really liked history. I really liked the biblical stories and archaeology and all kinds of stuff like that. So that's what I got myself into. But before I had to go to my studies, actually I had to go to the military. So I served in the IDF for 3 years. I was a combat medic in an infantry brigade in Givati, which is one of the infantry brigades of Israel. Most of my service was down south in Gaza, actually around Gaza, in Gaza itself as well. I've been there. I was basically from 2005 to 2008. That was my mandatory service. And then I was also in reserves. I moved here to the U.S. about 5 years ago with my wife, and I worked for a travel agency, studied to be a tour guide, like you said, and I came here to kind of help out with a travel agency here in Virginia, in Richmond. So focused on tours to Israel. Last few years was very like a roller coaster. You had COVID, you had pandemics, now you have a war. All kinds of things are happening. But I'm here today basically to have a discussion, and you're welcome to eventually ask different questions about different stuff about Israel, and particularly modern Israel, what Israel has today, what's going on. Also today, I'm very informed with current news of everything. Actually since they came here, most of my news outlets are from Israel, and in Hebrew and everything. So sometimes there's a different perspective of what's happening on the ground. But our focus today would be, was asked by Sam to talk about 2 very important wars that shaped the nation of Israel, shaped the world, I would say, the Middle East in a way. And it's a really fascinating time of history that I'll focus on. But again, eventually feel free to dive into any type of questions or different things that you have. I'm very kind of an informal type of guy, so I would guide and be on the ground, pointing out different things and different, that's kind of the way I like to roll. So feel free if you have any questions, and also I don't mind interrupting in questions and stuff if there's a kind of things are, if you want some clarification about stuff. So I do have a degree in history, not a master's, but kind of a bachelor's degree, and I did do a tour guiding course. So recently I've been diving into some IT work and cybersecurity. That's kind of where I'm aiming right now. But my passion is history, the land of Israel, and that's kind of where I focused most of my career. So I just wanted to start. First of all, we have a few symbols here, and I'm glad we have the flag of Israel. We put it up. We're a little fortress here. So the flag of Israel, we have the Star of David. Does anyone know what the origin of the flag of Israel is? What is it? Where does it come from? Does anyone have do you guys know? Anyone? So there's a thing called a talit, which is a prayer shawl that Jews wear, and eventually I'll have a picture of it in a moment. They wear it usually in prayers during on the synagogue on Shabbat and Saturdays, and that's kind of where it came out of. We have the Star of David, very very ancient symbol. Now, not from the time of King David, unfortunately, but it did have that symbol that was put on Jews basically because of persecution. Many different places in Europe, they actually put a star. It was actually I think in the mid ages, it was actually a yellow star. Okay, you guys probably familiar with that symbolism from World War II and in Nazi Germany. That was early on in different places. There were ghettos in Europe in the mid ages where actually Jews had to wear that as an identifier. But that is the state of Israel. That's the flag, and this is the coat of arms of Israel. Just want to point this out. This is kind of the symbol of Israel, as we kind of the official seal. And we have the menorah. Okay, that's this is the branch thing over here. And you have the name of the country is Israel, okay? And you have these, the olive trees coming out. Now this menorah is a very symbolic menorah, okay? It's obviously on painting and it's engraved. But that menorah is the same, they basically took the copy of the menorah that was placed in Titus's arch in Rome, okay? Titus is the conqueror of Jerusalem in the second, when they conquered Jerusalem in the second century, the Romans, they destroyed the Holy Temple, and they carried the menorah with them into basically into Rome. So when the founders of the state of Israel were looking for a symbol that would kind of represent the country, it would be that same menorah that was engraved on Titus's arch in Rome. Okay, so if you've ever been to Rome, I don't know if you've traveled to Rome, but there's many arches there. There's one small little arch, but for the Jewish people, that's a very symbolic one. Actually, it's not so. It's different. I was there a few years ago, and you can miss it if you don't kind of know where you want to go. It's kind of hidden a little bit away, but it was on the main road in ancient Rome. But when the state of Israel was declared in 1948, the Jews of Rome actually had they kind of marched to it as a symbolic moment. So that's what became the seal of the state of Israel. Okay, so it's the official kind of thing that people see on government offices and everywhere. So I put the title of this lecture or discussion, as I mentioned, but is a tale of two wars. Okay, now this idea that there's narratives, there's ideas that that are distributed around the world about what happened to the state of Israel. Why does the state of Israel exist? Why are the Jewish people in the land of Israel? Right? There's all kinds of narratives that we hear all around the world, and it's good to kind of know. First of all, there could be different perspectives, but it's also good to know kind of the ideas, the facts, the emotions, the background of why the state of Israel exists and why the nation of Israel exists in the land of Israel. So we're going to be talking about. I hope you guys you got some information about the 6-Day War and Yom Kippur War. Okay, those are the two very, very dramatic events in the history of the state of Israel. And they, again, like I said, they shaped the nation of Israel till this very day, actually. So victory, failure, recovery, peace, and war. And as I was kind of going over the material to kind of refresh my memory about different things, I was kind of looking into what happened in the 1960s and the 70s and what's happening today in Israel. There's a lot of similarities. Now, it's not the same. We don't, as the phrase "history repeats itself." It's true, but sometimes there's different nuances and different things. But there's a lot of similarities. Very, very kind of odd kind of connections that you can make. Very, very sad ones. For instance, different dates and stuff. But it's good to kind of understand that the nation of Israel, the state of Israel, and you guys are here mostly, hopefully, to show your support for the state of Israel. It's very fragile. The nation of Israel is very fragile, and this is kind of one of the events. These events kind of are very crucial moments in the history of Israel. So, let me. Sorry about that. Just a moment. Where did it go? All right. Sorry. There we go. All right. There we go. All right. So from 1948 until 1967. Okay. I put two maps here. Now, this map, if you don't know what you're looking at, it could be very confusing. Obviously, it's a lot of color, a lot of different things. But what you see here is to the left one. That's the map of Israel, the way the land of Israel when it was established in 1948. Just a little background. The British were in control from 1917, basically, and eventually they established what is called the mandate over mandatory Palestine, the land of Israel. They controlled until 1948. They had a date when they're going to exit. Okay, that was the 14th of May, 1948, or 15th of May, to be honest. It was a Saturday, so it was a kind of day before the state was established. If you kind of go back in time, during the 1930s, there were many different plans of what to do with this land, right? So one of them is the partition plan. There's a different thing, in different series of events that led to it. On the 29th of November, 1947, the UN resolution decided that yes, the nation of Israel, the Jewish people do have the right to establish their country, but it will be a split country between a Jewish country and an Arab country. Now, this is what I wanted to kind of point out. If you look at the blue line, okay, look the blue section. So you look on the right, up on the top to the right. That's the Sea of Galilee, that little body of water there. And you look at the blue section. That would be the Jewish state, okay. And then everything else, that would be the Arab state. That was kind of what the UN resolution in 1947 gave. While in the center we have Jerusalem, and that's that kind of purple area. That would be an international city. That was kind of the intention. Now, it didn't, that resolution never was fulfilled, but that's kind of the legal background of the establishment of the state of Israel. Is based on that. In the Declaration of Independence, when David Ben-Gurion reads it, he kind of uses that as the kind of background, or I would say the legal background for the establishment of the state. Obviously, that's not the reason why the state exists, and we'll kind of get into the strong connection that the Jewish people have to the land of Israel for generations. But let's kind of dive into what happened after the war in 1948. So the War of Independence starts basically a day after the Declaration of Independence. That's when 5 Arab countries started to invade, or they kind of were waiting to invade the newly state of Israel. They started to gear up way before the Declaration of Independence, kind of months before, but they were ready, and they launched a war right after the British left. They didn't want to deal with the British. I was just kind of, again, going into kind of the historical narrative. The British, their main interest was the British, right? They kind of taking care of what their interest was. And there's a lot of oil fields in Iraq, and they basically helped the Iraqis to build their military. They also established Transjordan, which is the east of the land of Israel, and they also helped the military there. So the commander of the Jordanian forces, for instance, he was a British officer. Because sometimes, I don't know if you hear this on the media, or different people kind of say different things about how it's like Israel is a colonial entity, right? That the British were the ones that kind of put them in there, and they were backing them and all that. That was true in some parts of history, but eventually they also helped the Arabs, okay? And you have all kinds of different, I won't go into all the small details of, the different dynamics that the British went through, and changes in their policies throughout the years. But in that, so from 1948 until 1967, by the way, 1948, the Jewish population in Israel is about 600,000 Jews, right? And 6,000 of them, they were casualty in the war. They died in battle. It's 1% of the population during the independence war, fighting for their existence. But they succeed to secure their borders. Now, they kind of expanded a little bit beyond the partition plan. You can see here, let me kind of go over here. You can see taking over the Halutza area in the Negev on the border with Egypt. This would be Egypt. This would be south. and you can see also in inward and also all of the north of Israel. Okay, now what's happening right now, in the north of Israel with Lebanon, that area was secured right on the border with Lebanon in 1948, and since then it's officially Israeli territory. And the Arab countries that invaded the land, Egypt came from the south. They were about to kind of go to Tel Aviv. They had this idea that we're going to meet in Tel Aviv. They were blocked. Okay, right over there at that corner over there, you can see the green area. That's the Gaza Strip. Okay, obviously you know a lot about the Gaza Strip last year, and that was occupied by Egypt from 1948. Okay, that was an Egyptian territory. They brought in their troops. They brought in army. Their army. I know there was also the arms lines, but they control that area. And you also have in the east, you have the Jordanians. They also occupied the area that's kind of the heartland of the country, and that's Judea and Samaria, which eventually they called the West Bank. Why is it called the West Bank? Because it's on the west side of the Jordan River, okay? Because the Jordan River would be the river that flows from the top, you see, from Sea of Galilee all the way down to this body of water over here, which is the Dead Sea. So the Jordanians controlled both sides of those area. And also I brought this map of Jerusalem, okay? This is Jerusalem from 1948 until 1967, okay? This is a very crucial moment here. The nation of Israel was established, by the way, the Declaration of Independence was in Tel Aviv, okay? And eventually they did move they did move the capital to Jerusalem, but not to all of Jerusalem, because Jerusalem was split, okay? This is the split. You have the partition line between what would be Arab Jerusalem or Jordanian-controlled Jerusalem, and you have Israeli Jerusalem. You have all kinds of demilitarized zones there, and also including the Old City, okay? The Old City of Jerusalem, 1 square kilometer. That's where the holy sites are. That was off limits for Jews for 19 years, from 1948 until 1967. If you ever been to Jerusalem, I don't know if has everyone been to Israel, anyone kind of traveled and stuff, you know that there's 4 quarters in Jerusalem, and there's a historical quarter called the Jewish Quarter. Okay, so the Jewish Quarter, Jews have been lived there. We have evidence of Jews kind of coming back to Jerusalem and stuff from the Mid Ages, 12th century. There's a kind of ancient synagogue there, but Jews always settled in that area in the Jewish Quarter. So it's a very, very kind of ancient Jewish community. Eventually, Jews came in and out, and there's all kinds of people from all kinds of background that existed and was deported from the Old City in 1948. By the way, the day was 2 weeks after the Declaration of Independence. You have 14th of May and the 28th of May. The Jewish Quarter fell into the hands of the Jordanians. Now they gave the people about 2 hours to gather their belongings. It was a Shabbat. It was a Friday afternoon, and they left. And some of them never really returned. So that was kind of the background of what happened in Jerusalem and the nation of Israel after the establishment of the state of Israel. So let's kind of read some of the points that I wanted to kind of point out. Newly formed state, right? We have mass immigration after the war. There's a deportation of Jews that lived in Muslim countries, in Arab countries. Okay, there's about 750,000 Jews that became refugees. Where do they go? Some go to New York and Miami, and some go to the land of Israel. And they're kind of absorbed, and they absorbed into the country. They become refugees, but eventually, a few years, they come in, they resettle, and they build houses, and they settle in remote areas. Some of them in the Negev desert. They really become the second generation of pioneers in the land of Israel. And that brings a lot of economic challenges, right? You have all kinds of also dynamics, different, internal political challenges between people that were here before the establishment of the state of Israel and the new immigrants. There's a lot of different things that were happening that brought a lot of economic challenges amongst the people, the nation of Israel. And what also happened was that there was an armistice line. By the way, they were formed in 1949, and the borders were secured. I mentioned it was a border, but let me kind of go to the next one here. They're not borders, okay? This is one of the things that a lot of people kind of go back. You probably heard of the term, the 1967 borders. Anyone heard that word? 1967 lines. Those are not really. That's not really a term. That's not really a historical term. That was kind of the way the state of Israel, its boundaries were formed in 1949, and they were broken actually and changed in 1967. So it's kind of a little semantics maybe on the wording, but it's very important to understand that they were not borders. Okay, they were not also recognized by the nations that surround the country. And the international community didn't recognize them also as official borders of the state of Israel. That's something that actually till this very day in some areas, some of the borders of Israel, they're not really defined as official borders of the country. It's a very kind of difficult way to govern and to kind of understand where your territory is. This picture over here is a very, very famous picture from the war. It's actually the ending point of the war. It was in El Rashrash, which is on the southern tip of the country, which is eventually what would be Eilat in the Gulf of Aqaba. That leads to the exit, the Aqaba port that leads to the Red Sea, basically, a point where it was very important for Israel to conquer and to secure its ability to send ships and have ships that can flow and go all over the world and go basically to the east. Think of what happened after the war, and we'll go into that about what happens with Egypt and the Suez Canal. But this is a very, very important strategic location. We have these soldiers that I think the story is that they didn't have a flag with them, so they had to kind of they took some ink and they put it on a white sheet of that they found, and they wove it up on and put it on the Gulf of Aqaba. That was kind of a very important and a symbolic moment. The green line is a term just because that's when they established the DMZ lines. They just had a chalk that was green, and that's why it's called the green line. If you ever hear that term, so it's important to know. And then you have also the what happened, if you think of it, in 1949, after the establishment of the State of Israel, a lot of the territory that we would call historical Israel was not under Israeli control. Okay, that's why sometimes you hear the same territory, the same area has different, names. People give them different names, but this is very kind of important thing that a lot of the territory that was, if you go back into the Bible times, you go back to the Second Temple period. Where did the Jews live in the land of Israel? They lived in the mountains of Judea. Okay, and there's a lot of historical areas that was actually under control of the Jordanians until the 6 Day War. All right. Okay, so that's so the 6 Day War, 130 hours that in the summer of 1967, June 1967, that changed the Middle East and the land of Israel forever. Okay, it is a very kind of historical moment. You see here paratroopers or maybe soldiers on the Temple Mount. Okay, and this is also, you can see Jews dancing near the Western Wall. Very symbolic place in the nation of Israel. For 19 years, Jews were not allowed to enter the old city, despite the agreements that the Jordanians were supposed to provide the Jews access to these holy sites. They did not do that. Okay. Let me just take a sip of water, just a moment. All right. Yes, questions? Yes.
ID that showed where they're from, I guess.
No, there was just barbed wires, and it was the city was basically split into two. So there were soldiers on both sides of the thing. So there was, I think, one crossing where people were allowed to cross from back and forth. By the way, there was an Israeli enclave in the Hadassah complex. That was where the Hebrew University library offices or research labs were. Yes, I did. Yeah, I can go back. Let me just go back here. Yeah, Mount Scopus. Yeah, there you go. So that was actually an Israeli enclave on the other side. So they had to go back. It actually gave them the opportunity to kind of secure the area. Every 2 weeks they had convoys that would go back and forth. But that was, but basically they weren't allowed to go to travel to the east side of the city. Yes, please.
All
Yeah.
the areas that were mandated by the British to be for Arabs were actually occupied by Arab countries. Were there any areas that were not occupied by Arab countries that were just left for the Palestinians there? Or?
So no, so it was basically split into three, those areas. So part of it was conquered by Israel, okay, and that was mostly in the Negev desert, the Chalutza area that was on the south over here. And you can see here if you look at the territory that is around this area over here, okay, and this area over here, that was conquered by Israel, okay. And the green area, that's conquered by, on the south, in the Gaza Strip, that's by Egypt. And in the east, that was by Jordan.
It just seems like
Yeah.
that's something that in the conflict today is recognized, that those areas were actually occupied by Arabs.
Yes. Yeah.
Who were also, not allowing there to be a.
Right. It was, and it was there was that's kind of the debate that people are kind of trying to understand. Okay, the identity of the Palestinian strife for independence. When does it start? PLO, by the way, which is the Palestinian Liberation Organization, I think, was established before the 6-Day War, before the occupation of of West Bank, as so call, and they actually were challenging the Jordanians too, because Jordanians didn't actually give them what they wanted. So, yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. That's one of the things that people forget about those different things. Now, later in the 60s, when Gamal Abdel Nasser, the leader, the president of Egypt, he became kind of a very popular figure in the Arab world. Many were kind of mesmerized by the idea that maybe the Arabs will actually have one big kind of country controlled by Egypt. So some of the Palestinians also really admire that aspiration. That's one of the things that will go in the next few slides about the war itself. Yes, please. Yeah.
Any of the colorings, their geographical distinctions?
No. So again, yeah. So the coloring again, I'll kind of maybe kind of emphasize that. This is just shows the territory that the blue kind of color, that's the territory that was promised by the UN to the state of Israel, to Jewish sovereignty. Okay, the red kind of color, that was what was promised to the Arabs. So it's kind of split into two. They basically did it according to the population. So they noticed, okay, there's more Jews that live in the northern area above there on the coastline, and then in the red area, that was where they gave it to the Arabs. That was the promise. After the war, Israel conquered those areas around it, and then the Jordanians took the area from the Palestinians, or from what the Palestinians would become. Yeah.
Maybe I wanted
Yeah.
to-
Yeah. I'm sorry.
I should have said topography.
Topography. Yeah.
Their mountain range. It seems
Oh
like
yeah, that's
the ground
yeah.
is-
No, but it's not a topographical map. But you're right. Actually, if you do look at the land, at the shape of the land of Israel, there is a series of mountains that goes in the center, and you have the coastline over here. So if you look, that does kind of it does imitate the topography of the land, but that's not what this map is. Yeah, that was a good point though. Yeah, it's actually yeah. All right. Any further question I can go on, or yes, please. Yeah. Yeah.
The spot
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
and all by itself.
Yeah.
Jordanian,
Yeah.
Jerusalem, what was that supposed to
Yeah, so that was an outpost that wasn't conquered by the Jordanians. It's the Hebrew University complex that after the war ended, there were still Jews settled there, so they controlled that area. So they were allowed. There was a convoy. The UN kind of escorted them every 2 weeks. That was just an enclave. Yeah. I don't think people actually lived there. It was more like patrols and like a police force that was supposed to be there, and but they did use it for intelligence reasons, of course. Yeah.
I have one more
Later.
question,
Yes.
please.
Yeah.
So, were you saying that Israel, kind of the red areas, later after
Yeah.
the agreement?
Yeah.
Took some of those areas?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be against the agreement?
Yes, but the thing was the war. So the UN resolution never was actually um, fulfilled. What was fulfilled? It was an attack by the Arab countries. That was basically what caused the whole thing. Now Israel, by the way, the leaders of the Zionist movement at the time agreed to this agreement. They agreed for it. The Arabs actually refused. That was one of the things. The UN voted it for it. Everyone, the nation said, "Here, this is what we're offering. Here, take it." The Jews actually agreed to it even without Jerusalem. That was one of the things. But the Arabs refused, and then the Arab countries came in and said, "Hey, we have 5 different countries. By the way, you had Egypt, you have Jordan, you had Iraq, you had Lebanon, and then Syria." Yeah, so they all basically came back. Those are also new states, by the way, that were established in the 40s, and they basically said no. The British left. They kind of brought all this mess on us. We're gonna take over. We want to make sure. I have a point here. We'll take this bone in the throat of our countries out and wipe them out to the sea. That was basically this is the rhetoric that they used. So yeah, the UN resolution is still kind of talked about. The 2-state solution is still on the table occasionally. Officially, that's the official policy of the U.S. towards the conflict, but it was established, in 1949. 1947. That's when they kind of started to talk about it. All right. Okay. So, all right. 6-Day War. All right. So this is a famous picture at the Western Wall of paratroopers. They're very, very kind of excited looking at it. They're in awe because they secured Jerusalem. All right. Why did Israel? So, who started the war in 1967? Does anyone know? Who was the first to launch the war? So, officially, it was actually Israel, and we'll go into that in a moment. But the Egyptians were very aggressive. That was one of the things that happened. That's the casus belli. I hope I pronounced it correctly. It's kind of funny word that I. But Nasser was sought to unite the Arab world under Egyptian leadership. Gamal Abdel Nasser, he was the leader of Egypt. And Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon joined the effort. Jordan was kind of a little iffy about it. Eventually, they did join, but they were kind of forced into it by this kind of idea that they would succeed to secure a big, maybe an Arab state. What happened also in the north, the Syrians started a project that was meant to divert the waters of the Jordan River to the state of Israel. Basically, there was a lot of effort to wipe out the nation, not also from its water sources, because most of the water sources were up in the north. But the main thing that caused, the war, that basically put the Israeli authorities on the alarm, was the block of the Tiran Straits from shipping in the Red Sea. And that's kind of something that was kind of looking into today, but the Red Sea, how it's still still related to what's happening in the conflict today with the Yemen and the Houthis down there. But here, this is where they basically said, look, see Israel, this is the Red Sea. So Israeli ships were not allowed to go through the Suez Canal, okay? They were blocked. You know what? I don't know about that. Maybe they were allowed to. Maybe there's some agreement that were allowed, because I think it was run by, originally it was run by I think a French company. What happened was Nasser decided to nationalize it, okay? And basically said, we're going to take over, we're going to do all that. And then they're also going to block the ships to travel, to go into the Gulf of Aqaba. That was that picture that I showed you with the flag. That's where they put it over here. And that basically meant that Israel was blocked off from shipping, from ships coming in and giving supplies, from the east. This is what a very important shipping route. That was basically the cause that said, okay, put the Israeli officials on alert. Said we need to do something about it. But what did we do? Right? It was 22nd of May, 1967, and the people of Israel were waiting for a response. And the response was very slow. And that was something that happened with Levi Eshkol, the prime minister. So here I want to read a few quotes just to kind of understand the rhetoric that was on in the Arab world. This is led by, this is Nasser, the Arab, the president of Egypt. I gave instruction, this is basically giving instructions to all the UN forces to be ready for action against Israel at the moment. Sorry, the UAR, sorry. Action against Israel at the moment. It might carry out on any aggressive action against any Arab country. Due to these instructions, our troops are already concentrated in Sinai on our eastern border. For the sake of the complete security of all UN troops, I request that you issue your orders to withdraw all troops immediately. So told the UN, leave Sinai. Did the UN leave Sinai? What do you think? They're peace forces, right? Should they leave? Yes, they left. They just said, okay, we're out of here. So they basically were there to secure the 1949 agreements. Said, okay, we're out of here. Nasser is doing what he's doing, and they basically left. And this is kind of what was propaganda that was propagated on the radio in Cairo on a regular basis. They also had a propaganda radio that they would broadcast also in Israel, in Hebrew, to the people of Israel, saying, okay, the existence of Israel has continued too long. Only 19 years, right? It's too long. We welcome the Israeli aggression. We welcome the battle we have long awaited. The peak of hour has come. The battle has come in which we shall destroy Israel. Okay, kind of that was the rhetoric that was kind of putting people on their feet. And then there's another one that was a little more. All right, this is in Iraq. Okay, this is in Iraq. So he says the president of Iraq, Abdul Rahman Arif. Brethren and sons, this is the day of the battle to avenge our martyred brethren who fell in 1948. It is the day to wash away the stigma. We shall, God willing, meet in Tel Aviv and Haifa. Okay, that was their thing. So we went to meet there, and they were telling, and if you hear this, okay, first of all, they didn't have television in Israel at the time. They only had like black and white. If people had TVs, they would from all the Arab countries. You see all these people mass protests in the streets. People were very frightened. They were very, very shivered. They also started from that period of time. They started to prepare graveyards, and they called also reservists to come in. People that were fought in the War of Independence. It's time for you to kind of come in and help. And also, if they had, the army was very, very minimal at the time. Wasn't as the state of Israel has today, and the backup was very, very minimal as well from the thing. I want to show you something that's this is a kind of a video about. Yes, please, yes, there.
We hear
Yeah.
so much about Palestinian state. It's always been without. But what you're saying here is that in 1967, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan were not attacking Israel in order to establish a Palestinian state.
Right. I mean, that wasn't the agenda. Yeah. Yeah. Right. That was it. Yeah. That was, or maybe under the leadership of Nasser, because he was promoting the pan. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't really. That wasn't really the agenda. At least in they didn't really talk about it. Maybe there was a hidden agenda, but it didn't really talk about it like publicly. That wasn't the main reason. Yeah. Was still wanted in Jordan for terrorism. Yeah. 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 He basically, the first attack was against the Jordanians, so they didn't really want that. All right. So what do you do? All right. So before I go to this video, they're waiting now. Levi Eshkol, who was the prime minister at the time of Israel, he basically wanted to waited for diplomacy. He said, we need to do something. We need to wait. Maybe we're a small country. At the time, go into that. Most of the allies were very neutral about the situation. Okay, even the U.S. Okay, it's kind of a very kind of odd, very kind of sad moment. But they were very hesitant. The Cold War in the background, of course, of the different things. The Soviet Union was backing the Arabs. They were giving them all the different missiles and different things, and the tanks. The tanks that all the Arab countries had were Soviet T5, I think, tanks. But excuse me. So Levi Eshkol was hesitant, and then he goes on the radio and he is very stuttering. You know, it's a very kind of moment where people say, "What's going on with our country? Are they going to do something?" Right? They're waiting for a response. Eventually, there was a decision that was made that basically this is where the war it was the beginning of the end of the war. This is it. And how long was the war, by the way? Right? It was 6 days. Okay, it was 130 hours. So this is one of the most amazing things that happened in the war, and that's why I want to show you kind of a video clip that someone made about it. That's kind of gives us into the event that kind of shaped it. It's called Operation Focus. Focus. Okay, Moked. All right. So.
It's considered one of the most successful air campaigns in the history of warfare. Operation Focus, or Moked in Hebrew, was the preemptive assault launched by the Israeli Air Force against the air forces of 4 Arab states on June 5th, 1967, the surprise attack that marked the start of the Six-Day War. On the morning of June 5th, Israeli fighter jets suddenly appeared in the skies above 11 different Egyptian airfields. They had taken off while maintaining complete radio silence to ensure the element of surprise. They flew at low altitude to evade Egyptian radar systems. The time of arrival at target, 07:45 hours, was not coincidental.
It's 7:45. The alert was finished and they went to eat breakfast. And while they are having the tea and the salad and the eggs and all that, suddenly bombs on the base.
Retired Major General Herzl Bodinger took part in the operation as a young fighter pilot.
We passed the border. Now the land is unknown. We never flew there before. And we are passing over a tank convoy from Egyptians. And they're standing on the roof and waving hello to us, which showed that they didn't know who we are. And in my mind, it came up that you're waving and we accept your wave. You lost the war.
Nearly all of Israel's 196 combat planes were committed to the mission, including French-made Voitures, Mystères, Ouragans, and Mirage 3s. Only 12 jets were held back for defensive purposes. The Israeli planes first focused on destroying the Egyptian runways, using specially designed anti-runway bombs. Afterwards, they continued to circle the airfields while targeting Egyptian aircraft that were left stranded on the ground. 197 Egyptian planes were destroyed just in this initial wave of attack. Only 8 of these ever managed to get in the air. The Israeli jets then rushed back to their home bases, rearming and refueling, before taking off again within minutes.
Last one, I get knocked in the aircraft, and I'm looking on the instrument panel. I see on the left side engine, the fuel gauge is starting to go down.
Bodinger realized he had just enough fuel left to reach Israel's southernmost city.
Over the range of the port of Eilat, I reached the last drop of fuel, shut down the right engine. Now the runway is in front of me, and I touched the overrun of the runway. I stopped.
The second wave of attack began only 109 minutes after the first. 107 more Egyptian planes were destroyed in this strike. By midday, the air forces of Jordan, Syria, and Iraq had begun bombing targets in Israel, just as Israeli jets were about to begin a third wave of strikes against Egypt.
Yeah.
In response, Israeli Air Force Chief Major General Moti Hod decided to divert planes to attack air bases in Jordan, Syria, and even Iraq. The small Jordanian Air Force was wiped out in this wave of strikes, while half of Syria's fighter jets were destroyed on the first day of the war. The H-3 airfield in western Iraq was targeted because of the tuple of Tu-16 bombers stationed there. Herzl Bodinger was among the pilots sent to bomb them on the second day of the war. On the way, they spotted a division of Iraqi tanks positioned on the border with Jordan.
I said, let's do something. So they got my idea. We went one run on the tanks. The people ran away, and we were now on the second day of the war. They didn't reach the war.
With complete air superiority achieved, the Israeli Air Force was free to concentrate on strikes against the collective ground forces of its enemies, a critical factor in the capture of the Sinai Peninsula, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. At least 451 enemy aircraft were destroyed by the Israeli Air Force during Operation Focus. The vast majority of them were still on the ground. Israel lost 46 planes of its own during the war. The victories achieved by the Israeli Air Force in the Six-Day War made its commanders national heroes. To this day, few positions in Israeli society carry more prestige than that of fighter pilot.
All right, yeah, so that's what started the war and kind of ended the war in a way. But it was just the day one, right? And then, so within 3 days after that, the Israelis had achieved an overwhelming victory on the ground, capturing the Gaza Strip and all the Sinai Peninsula up to the east bank of the Suez Canal. That's kind of what happened after the Operation Focus. The tank brigade started to go into the Sinai Desert. Now, it started off, by the way, in Han Yunis in Rafah. Okay, if you've ever heard of those areas in Gaza Strip, they're very. That's an area that's been a lot of battles fighting last year. That's where the Egyptians were there, and then from there they kind of went into and they got into the Sinai, conquered the Sinai within a day, within a few hours. And they secured all the Sinai. I'm going to show you what happened on day 3. Just a moment, let's go to the next one. Before we go this one, I wanted to show what happened. Where was it? Okay. Just a minute. Okay. Here we have. So you can see the state of Israel. This is the size of it. You can see the yellow area, which is Israel, and then you see the more browner area. That's the Sinai Peninsula. And then you have the West Bank, you have the Golan Heights up in the north. So Israel triples its size after the war, basically. But let's go back to what happens on day 3. Also a very symbolic moment in the war, and I think it's very worthwhile to see. All right.
June 7th, 1967, day 3 of the war. The previous day, Israeli troops had reached the strategic high point of Mount Scopus in Jerusalem. They now overlooked the Old City. For the last 19 years, Jerusalem had been divided. In 1948, Jordan had captured the eastern part of the city, which included the Old City and the Temple Mount, the location of the ancient Jewish temple, Judaism's holiest site. Under Jordanian rule, Jews were evicted from the Jewish quarter. Synagogues were destroyed, and the Mount of Olives, Judaism's oldest and holiest cemetery, was vandalized. For 19 years, Jews had been barred from access to their holy sites in eastern Jerusalem, despite the rights promised in the 1949 Armistice Agreement. In the early morning of June 7th, the Israeli paratroopers advanced on the holy city. They advanced without artillery support, seeking to prevent damage to the city's ancient and historic sites. The battle lasted from early morning to the afternoon, when the announcement was made on the radio. Har Habayit Yedenu. The Temple Mount is in our hands. For the first time in 19 years, Jews could pray at the Western Wall, and for the first time in 2,000 years, a united Jerusalem, Judaism's holiest city, was back in sovereign Jewish hands. After capturing Jerusalem, the paratroopers moved south to reinforce other forces in the West Bank areas surrounding the city. The cities of Hebron, Bethlehem, and the region of Gush Etzion were captured with little to no resistance. The West Bank, the historical birthplace of the Jewish people, which until 1948 had maintained a Jewish presence for 3,000 years, was once again under Jewish control. The battle on the Eastern Front was virtually over, but in the north, the fighting continued.
Right. Okay. So that was also one of the. Oh, all right. Very, very symbolic moment. The paratroopers coming up, especially at the Temple Mount. You also have. They also blew the shofar on the Temple Mount, and what happened a few days later when the defense minister basically decided that they'll allow the Muslims kind of go back and pray on the Temple Mount, and Israel had sovereignty over the Old City. It was kind of a whole different thing of how they were trying to understand how to govern Jerusalem at the time. So we had three fronts, physical fronts that were fought in this war, in the 6-Day War. You had the Eastern Front with the Jordanians. Again, they conquered all the West Bank. And you had the Southern Front with the Egyptians. Okay. So at the end of the war, Israel triples its size and demonstrates its power. It won despite all odds with minimal backup. Okay, the U.S. started to take Israel more seriously, especially after the Soviet Union broke ties with Israel before the war. But before that, I think it was Johnson, the president at the time, was very hesitant to support Israel at the time. The victory was pretty amazing for the nation of Israel, because just 5 days before that, they thought they'll be annihilated. That was really the feel of the people. So it's kind of a miraculous event. Many Jewish historical sites under Israel control were now under Israeli control. And then also there's about at the time about 1.2 million Arabs were under direct control of Israel in Gaza in the West Bank. Hundreds of thousands of Bedouin in the Sinai and a couple thousand Druze in the Golan Heights. Now they're under Israeli control. That started a debate amongst Israeli society. Okay, are we going to go and control these areas? What are we going to do with that population? Will there be residents of the state of Israel? Will they be citizens of the state of Israel? Eventually, they decided officially to annex all of Jerusalem to become officially state of Israel. That's the official status of all of Jerusalem. When the Arabs that lived in Jerusalem, they became residents, or eventually, if they want, they can become citizens of the state of Israel. In the territories around it, the West Bank, that's the place that they haven't decided basically the fate of it. And I think you have all kinds of recommendations in the books, right, Sam, about those topics and the different political kind of movements in the time. I do have a few more things I thought I wanted to go about the tanks and different brigades, but I did want to also go into a few other things about the Yom Kippur War. But yeah, yeah. Yep.
Take
Yeah.
questions.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then we'll bring you back
Okay. Yeah.
to finish up.
Yeah. Okay.
How does that sound?
That's fine. Yeah.
So you'll have to come back in December. Part 2.
Yeah. Okay.
Please, your questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Any questions? Any kind of clarifications?
So initially, the
Yeah.
U.S. did not provide any military.
Not officially. No. Not in the 6-Day War.
French jets.
Yeah, that was actually later. That was in the Yom Kippur War was a different story. Also hesitated at the big. Yeah, that was a thing. I'll show you. Wait, this is kind of from June 6th. This is from a British newspaper, but it said Israel claims land and air successes. Britain and U.S. declare neutrality. Basically, that was officially what they were doing. After the war, they realized, wait, we need a power like that in the Middle East to help us fight, specifically the Soviet Union that was, gaining control over the Arab countries and aiming at giving them, aid and stuff. Yeah.
Probably like, a lot of folks in Israel, we're going to get beat up pretty bad, so they didn't want to, get involved when they were going to lose.
Right, exactly, yeah. They also warned them. Said, if you do it, we're not going to back you. That's what they said. Yeah, they were afraid that they would lose. They said, don't do it. They did it. Said there's a term in that time, there's a term that's called en brera. There's no, en brera. We don't have a choice, basically. We don't have a choice. We have to fight. It's just, that was the rhetoric and all the different things and the different, the way they did it. Yeah. Yeah, please. Yes. Yeah.
The propaganda that they had beforehand from the Arabs that basically we're going to just annihilate them was the motivation and the fear of the people and the protect to be preemptive. But I know like today, all of our media would tell the citizens of all the other countries of how Israel went first in the attack.
Yeah.
And put them in a bad light. Is that what happened even after? I mean, for me, looking back, I just see it was a huge miracle.
Yeah.
But the people that were living in the U.S. right after, were they being told from their media that it was Israel was the bad guy?
I don't know, actually. That's a good question. I don't.
I think Israel is seen as really vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think people were really compassionate because they were the underdog.
Yeah, they became very popular. I think. Yeah, later Israeli soldiers became very popular because they won the war. But at first they didn't want to associate with them. They said, yeah.
Zionism
Yeah.
before 67 was not something you necessarily talked about in polite company. That there were youth groups, there were a couple of Zionist youth groups, but not what you saw after 67. And so using that knowledge, and I would I need to go back and re-look. You can buy some really nice books on the 6 Day War, and they really don't talk about the American news coverage. However, American Jews found out very quickly what was going on and were able to connect the dots and realize that Israel did a wonderful thing. And talk about the miracles.
Yeah.
There were.
Yeah.
There were miracles up in the Golan. There were miracles with Egypt,
Right.
and that really started American Zionism first class as it exists today.
Mm-hmm.
So in '67, the U.S. would have been, pretty heavily involved in becoming increasingly involved in Vietnam.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was.
I'm sure, yeah.
Johnson's
Right.
rationale of like Jesus.
That was right.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Fair enough. That's not. Yeah. But I mean, there was also the fact that the Soviet Union was heavily, supporting all the, and the socialist. Right.
Just because you involved in Vietnam doesn't mean that you.
Right. No.
Some level or not can ascertain a side to the back.
Right.
The newest book on my list by David Friedman goes into the history of the State Department as well as the Pentagon from 1947 clear until today. And Truman in 1948 was acting against his own State Department, against his own Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State, and then going through Eisenhower. He wanted to back Israel in '56 and was told, no, you can't.
Right.
And they threatened his not getting reelected. Kennedy actually bucked the trend a bit and actually established the first loans to Israel of military equipment, which then, as soon as Johnson gets in, were not eliminated, but greatly curtailed, again, because he was more willing to listen to the Department of State than was Kennedy.
Yeah.
So it's real, and still today, the State Department is Arabist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did the Israelis have time to kind of get ready for 67?
Well, yes. So that's one of the reasons why. So the Israeli society was very, very hesitant about the leaders, and Levi Eshkol. Think of it. You have a big kind of historical figure like David Ben Gurion, right? He's like a guy that has a vision, a historical kind of vision, and how he established the state. And then you have Levi Eshkol that kind of was in his term, and he was he was looked at as a very weak prime minister. What he did is he took Moshe Dayan, was the general, one of the generals earlier in 1956, and it was in the opposition. He basically said, okay, you're going to be the defense minister during the war, and that also helped prepare the war as well. But yes, they did prepare, and they were very. But it took a long. People were very anxious though to go on the war. They were, but the way they prepared, basically, they said, okay, they're gonna annihilate us. We need to make sure that we're ready. And people had cars. They would give the military would take it for use. They'd just bring everything they had to the table. That was basically geared. Think of this: about 2.5 million people at the time in Israel. Okay, the threat was about, I think it's 250 million or 120 million Arabs that basically were joined together, right? If they wouldn't attack the Iraqi Air Force, that would probably result in a different. Sorry, if they wouldn't attack the convoy of the tanks that were on the way to Israel, it would be a different result. I did just want to show just these slides of different areas in the West Bank that are historical, like Jewish sites that were conquered and it is still kind of until today. We have this is Shiloh Archaeological Dig 2024. Shiloh is where the first capital of the nation of Israel was in the biblical times, where the Ark of the Covenant was located. Yeah. So
And there's been more finds at the Shiloh dig in the past 10 years than by combining the other digs around the country over 20 years.
Right.
It's been wonderful. There's a archaeologist at my synagogue in Resort who specializes in this.
Right. And then you have also the tomb of the patriarchs, which is Hebron, which is where Abraham is buried. Okay. Jews were not allowed to go up into the tomb until basically they were allowed until 1948 to be up. There was a massacre in 1929. Since 1929 until 1967, there was no Jews in Hebron. They come back and they resettle, and they build a new synagogue there. So there's a lot of like different places that are very important, kind of in the Jewish narrative over the land. You have also the Dead Sea, part of it. Okay, this is kind of recreation, but that's also wasn't under Israeli control, or most of it, until 67. So that's why this is a crucial war in the history of the nation of Israel. Yeah. So sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Just wondering if anybody seems so masterful and so pivotal that they launched that attack on everybody's air forces
right
in the way that they did. Like, gosh, what if that wouldn't have happened in that way?
Right.
Is there anybody credited for that? Like, I always say, somebody did something big, they should have a name wrote.
Moti Hod was the Air Force commander. There's some different there's different I think the Air Force bases are named after him. But they became heroes, definitely. But also it wasn't only the Air Force; it was also the tank brigades. The tank brigades they were also Avigdor Kalani and other things. They did the groundwork. So all the generals became like heroes at the time. Ariel Sharon became the prime minister. The chief of staff was, by the way, Yitzhak Rabin. He became a very kind of like a hero for the nation. So yeah.
The Israeli intelligence, the CIA is Mossad.
Yes, or yeah.
Was that initiated?
That's a good question. I think it started before the establishment of the State of Israel, technically, because they were trying to smuggle Jews from Europe to the land of Israel. So it started off kind of operation of like different groups that were joined together. So in the early 40s, I think, or yeah.
So they maybe
had. Oh, definitely, they did. No, we do. We know about Eli Cohen. Eli Cohen, the Damascus. Yeah, he's your cousin.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What? Okay. So I grew up in Bat Yam, and there's a street named after him because he's was in Bat Yam, and Eli Cohen Street is a very. Okay. Wow. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Your cut. Wow.
Eli Cohen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Because that came from a Sephardic Jewish family.
Yeah. From.
That had some roots, and they lived in Syria and
Egypt, I think, only. Yeah. Oh yeah.
both.
Yeah. Both. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. They were originally from
Syria,
Yeah.
culturally, and he kind of he made it into these high ranks in the Syrian government. It's really amazing.
Yeah. One of the, I think. So is it the story is that he basically told them to kind of plant trees around the bases and stuff, and that's also what helped kind of identify where the where the bases were. I think that was thinking.
Yeah, up along
Yeah,
near Lebanon.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
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 I'll try to put that in the next newsletter.
yeah.
Okay.